Nature's purest product, they call it. It is surely nature's tastiest. Genuine into the wild uplands of Geauga, miles east of Cleveland. Now, last spring, 1 million maple trees were in half of Ohio's 88 counties. But the high spot of the whole syrup boiling springtime is the annual Maple Sugar Festival in Chardon. And if you were lucky enough to get any of the product or share any of the fun, not, well, you just stay with us as we start one of the most mouth-watering chapters in the Ohio story. The sugar country in Ohio starts when you cross the Geauga County line east of Cleveland and head for Chardon, the region's hub and capital. The maple tree is king here. Its symbols and signs are everywhere you look. Nowhere in the world are more maple products produced in a limited area than here. And the very fact of the sugar bush keeps alive traditions and crafts that come to us right out of another century. The steaming sugaring house is the most distinctively American upbringing. But work really starts days and even weeks before, while it's still winter in the woods. Now is the time to tap the trees before the sap has started to run. With this labor out of the way, it will be possible later to devote all energy to the collection of sap from the buckets. Spring comes with a rush, and when the sap starts to flow, there's no time to waste on other chores. A man with a power tapper can tap 700 trees a day. Old-fashioned hand tapping with a brace and bit limited a man to from 150 to 200 trees a day. The second man on the team drives in a spile, or spigot, on which is hung a 14-quart bucket. Depending on their size, some trees may have as many as 4 or even 5 tappings. During a season of about 6 weeks, a tree will give up from 4 to 9% of its sap to the sugar makers, far too little to hurt it in any way. Sap starts to run when the sun warms the southern slopes. A bucket will fill in half a day. Now, sugar making becomes a hectic business. Sugar, like hay, must be made while the sun shines, and any sap not collected during the brief flow is wasted. The tractor in the sugar bush has replaced the old stone boat drawn by horses or oxen, and these galvanized buckets keep sap in far better condition than the fabled basswood buckets of another generation. All American maple trees give a sweet sap, but only that of the hard maple, known also as the rock or sugar maple, is abundant enough or good enough to be used on a large scale. In the spring, all woodland roads lead to the sugaring house. Sap from all the trees in the sugar bush, 6,000 of them in this case, is hauled here. Conversion of sap to syrup and sugar takes place in this building. Gravity does the work of unloading sap into the storage tanks. Sap is mostly water. Only from 2 to 6% of it is sugar. 98% of the water in the raw sap must be removed to make syrup, and even more to make maple sugar. Sap is first piped to the storage tanks, and then fed into the sugaring house itself for processing. Evaporating pans, heated by wood fires, boil off most of the water. Inside the sugaring house, the steam is so thick, you literally can hardly see your hand in front of your face. Once the system is in full operation, it produces about 2 gallons of syrup every 20 minutes, which means boiling down more than 90 gallons of sap. Well, that's how the work gets done. But about 30 years ago, a Chardon hardware dealer named Art Carlson thought there should be a little more emphasis on the fun of sugar making. So he organized what has grown into the Chardon Maple Festival, an internationally famous event that has become a high spot on the calendar of the Ohio story. It usually takes place late in March or early in April. 50,000 pleasure seekers pour into Chardon, normally a town of 2,500. They come from all over the United States. For 3 days, they will be paying tribute to the maple tree and its products, and incidentally, spreading the fame of Ohio maple syrup all across the country. Chardon is one of the Yankee towns, one of the transplanted New England villages that dot the Western Reserve. But during festival time, its quiet town square becomes a combination carnival grounds, midway, and country fair, where the chief items for sale are maple delicacies of a dozen different kinds. Old traditions are revived by the iron kettle our great-grandfathers used in syrup boiling time. And old skills are kept alive with a sawing contest. If you're worried about your waistline, spend a winter doing this. Horses are giving way to tractors in the woods. But what crowd would ever gather to watch a tractor pull its heart out? The sight of the beautifully matched and trained teams straining into the harnesses to meet the challenge of the pulling contest carries the same elemental thrill for this generation it did for earlier Americans, whose very livelihood might depend on the performance of the great animals. Contests bring crowds, here as everywhere. They're on hand to cheer the winners and to laugh with some of them. All is good humor with the winner of the beer growing contest. But things are a little more tense when it comes to judging the maple products displays. This is the bounty of the forest. Over and above the value we place on syrup and sugar and candy for their own sweet sakes, they are the memory and echo of an earlier day. They keep alive a part of the past we would be sorry to let fade away. Every maple cake carries history as well as pleasure in its glistening crystals. Well, like a lot of good things, there can never be quite enough pure Ohio maple syrup to go around. There are only so many maple trees, and it takes 30 years to get a new one into production. And we're producing people faster than we are sugar bushes. And that's why I intend to be right up at the head of the line this spring, and every spring, when the sun gets a little higher in the south, when the frost begins to break in the hillside, and when the snow starts to soften in the woods, when the sugaring house begins to steam, and the sap begins to rise in the Ohio story.